currently happening in the Nashville real estate market? Well, we're going to be talking about that today, what we are actually seeing as of April 2023, plus we are going to be talking about, are we headed for a crash? I know that crash has been in the headlines. I've had clients ask me about it. So we are going to be talking about what we are seeing, what is predicted, all of that and more in today's video. Everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin Martin and I am a local Nashville real estate agent and founder of the Caitlin Martin team, powered by 𝐋𝐈𝐊𝐄 Realtors, the Andrews Group. I specialize in working with savvy sellers who want to sell right and sell smart, as well as working with out-of-staters looking to relocate to the Middle Tennessee area. Now, if this is your first time stopping by my channel, thank you so much. Please feel free to click subscribe down below so that you are notified anytime I release new video content, which is every Tuesday and Friday at 5 p.m. Central Time. Also, please feel free to head on over to Instagram and follow me at Caitlin Martin Realtor. And you can follow the team Instagram at the Caitlin Martin team, where we talk all things Nashville real estate and lifestyle. So in today's video, we are talking about what is currently happening in the Nashville real estate market and are we headed for a crash? Here's the thing. I know that there's a lot of headlines out there, especially about a crash. I know that there's a lot of headlines talking about prices are plummeting. And I've actually had clients ask me just in the last week, what's happening. So we're gonna be talking about that. We're gonna be taking a look at what our numbers show us. And today's video is going to be chock full of lots of graphs and stats. So this is not just some, we're just kind of throwing it out there and making predictions. We're actually going to be looking at statistical data. We're going to be looking at what the facts show us, because again, we need to be talking about facts over fear, because the media is not always going to be telling you the straight truth. So let's go ahead, dive on in and see what our statistics are showing us. So each month, Greater Nashville Realtors puts out our market statistics, and it covers all 9 counties that make up Middle Tennessee. So when we take a look at those numbers, in March of 2023, our total number of home sales, they were actually down 19% compared to March of 2022. But here's the thing, and this is what the Greater Nashville Realtors has actually come out and been saying now, is they're saying, look, we can't really compare what's happening this year to what's happening last year or even the year before. Because what happened in 2021 and 2022, that was an anomaly. That wild white hot market that we saw, that is not normal, it's not sustainable, and that is more so the outlier. It's the exception, not the norm. So we actually really need to start looking back to what our statistics show us from back in 2019, when we were in a much more stabilized market. Okay, so if we were actually gonna take a look at what happened in March 2023 and compare it to March of 2019, we were still down just barely in terms of total number of home sales. So in March of 2023, we had a total of 3,063 closings. Now compare that to March of 2019, and back then we had 3,237 closings. So you can see, yes, we're still slightly down, but here's the thing. Actually, back in March of 2019, we had dramatically more inventory than what we're dealing with now. So let's actually take a look at that number. Inventory at the end of March stood at 8,677 properties, which that is actually a huge increase from just the 3,685 properties that were currently on the market a year ago. But we've got to take a look at what was happening at 2019, because that's more of our baseline, remember, than 2022. So if we look all the way back to 2019, we had a total of 11,276 properties on the market as of the end of March 2019. So as you can see, yes, we are up from where we were last year. But again, you got to remember, last year and the 2 years prior, we were dealing with dramatically low inventory. And now you've seen we've had a bit of an uptick, But if we're comparing it to our baseline of what was happening in our far more stabilized market in March of 2019, we are still significantly down from the inventory that we had back then. So, one other thing that I do want to reiterate, especially if you maybe haven't really watched what's happened in the Nashville market in the last couple of years. So we were moving at a much more stabilized market. Now here's the thing, Nashville for the better part of the last 10 years has been a really hot relocation town. So we have gone through these ebbs and flows in a seller market over the past 10 years, where some it's been really, really hot, some it's been lesser hot, but yet we were still seeing great activity and still a very healthy market. And so then when March of 2020 came around, as the world shut down, so did the real estate market. But then about 6 weeks later, at the beginning of May, we really watched our market start to take off, and it really gained speed through the end of 2020 because so many people were able to work remote. They didn't have to stay where they were, and Tennessee became a really great place, especially Middle Tennessee, for people to land, and it still is. We continue to have a very heavy relocation population coming in. So then we watched our market become white hot, and from there we were really seeing dramatically low inventory, insanely high demand, which is what drove so many multiple offer situations and buyers going exceedingly over list price for about 2 years. I mean, we were seeing in a matter of about 3 weeks, we watched our market explode, where yes, you had to, right before the explosion, you had to go maybe 10, 15,000 over list to get a house. And then all of a sudden, boom, it was 75,000, 100,000 and more. And we were in a very white hot market for a long time, to the point that we were seeing about 4% appreciation month over month. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of April 2022, that's when we really started to see the brakes hit, especially as interest rates started to move. And so it was kind of clunky as we made our way through the rest of 2022. And Q4 especially was pretty slow in terms of just the activity. But then right there towards the end of January, beginning of February of this year, we really watched our market pick back up. So right now, what are we seeing? Well, we are in the midst of our spring selling season. So that means that there is going to be more inventory than before on the market. But it also means that more buyers are entering the market, because springtime is generally that time where people are needing to make a move. They're doing it at the end of the school year and before the next one starts. So we are seeing more activity happening. We have seen some multiple offers come back to the table. Now, we've not seen them go dramatically out of control like what we saw, in 2021 and into 2022. We've not seen that come back, but we are seeing them come back. But the buyer's not quite really having to give, their firstborn and a kidney in order to get a home, which was almost what it felt like in the peak of our market. But even with interest rates being a little bit higher than, those great historic lows, we are still seeing more buyers come to the market. And our market, here's the thing, I tell everybody this because we're about ready to start talking about, are we headed for a crash? But I tell everybody this, we are very fortunate to live and work in Nashville because we have so much going for us. So that's going to lead me right into talking about a crash. So we have to discuss this, because when I was starting to do some research, just because when I got asked that question in particular, like, oh my God, I've heard this headline, like, is the housing market going to crash? Do we need to sell? It kind of caught me off guard, and only because, I'm in the midst of this every day and I see what's happening, and I don't pay much attention to the headlines very often, because there have been so many times, whether it's been the local news or the national news, where they are painting a doom and gloom story. And for those that don't know, I actually worked in the news industry for 4 years out of college. I've been in the belly of the beast. I know how it works. And so I can tell you, it's so sensationalized. And at the end of the day, what does the news care about? Not you, ratings. I can guarantee you that, because I sat in consultant meetings where they were like, how do we get better ratings? Not how do we serve viewers better, it was how do we get better ratings? because they need to get better ratings, so the advertisers will continue to pay so they continue to make money. So there's that about the news. But again, they're like, oh, we heard that on the news. Do we need to sell? So let's talk about this, because that caused me to do some more research just to really see what are all of these headlines talking about. And I mean, headline after headline after headline is like, are we headed for a crash? So before we really dive into all of the things about a crash, let's actually first go take a look at just how many people are concerned, what the headlines look like, and then we're going to be talking about now versus then and making comparisons and showing the contrast. I'm going to go ahead and spoiler alert, we are not headed for a crash, at least not in the Nashville area, and we're going to be talking about why. But let's first take a look at those headlines, then we're going to come back and talk about then versus now. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of things. Let's see. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of things as we're really getting into this housing market crash talk. So I have this program attached to my browser that shows me, as you can see, like all of these numbers here, like the 165,000 a month, the 450,000. So this is what Google does. Like if you start to type it in, obviously you probably are well versed in the fact that they start to auto-populate these things. But as I can see with these metrics, it's showing that with a housing market crash, 165,000 searches a month are happening about this topic. So there absolutely is that fear out there in regards to what's happening with our housing market. Is it going to crash? So that's the first thing that I wanted to show and talk about, right? So people are searching that. So then if we come over here and we put in housing market crash, you can start to see all of these articles populating, the key number that should spook investors, instilling that fear in you. Warn of 20% market correction. Obviously, Swedish housing market doesn't really affect us that much. But as you can say, things are getting weird. Then you've got a hidden time bomb, a financial disaster brewing in the housing markets. Like if you start to look at all of these headlines, it really does paint that doom and gloom, and it can absolutely, like bank rate, is the housing market about to crash? It's really painting this picture of instilling fear because so many people remember the horrible repercussions that came from 2008. So as you can see, there's a ton of headlines, but there's so much more that we need to talk about. And we're going to be talking about what happened back then that set us up for the 2008 crash versus what we're seeing now. So like I said, there are so many headlines out there, but let's actually talk about what led to the crash of 2008 versus what is happening right now. So there were several factors that led to the crash of 2008. One of the main ones being an oversupply of housing and loose lending standards. So those were two major ones. So there was actually something that was put into place by the government years before the crash ever happened. And this is not a political thing. I'm literally just saying you can go do the research and find out. But there was this push to build housing. And so builders were really cranking out all of the housing, but it wasn't quite meeting, or it was exceeding the demand for that housing. So all of a sudden we had this oversupply of housing, but yet we didn't have quite the number of people to then match the supply that was being built. And so you had this oversupply of housing. Then you couple that with the fact that lending standards were very loose at the time. In fact, it even sounds crazy that this was ever actually a thing. But back then, the lenders could do just stated income loans. So you could walk in a bank, say, I make $400,000, and whether you truly made $400,000 a year or not, they would say, okay, and boom. Whereas today, if you say you make $400,000, you quite literally have to be able to prove that you do in fact make that money. Lending standards, lenders learned their lessons from way back then because they got absolutely burnt. There's always that saying that's trust but verify. They were trusting and not verifying. So you can see where, yeah, you want to trust that people are going to say they make the money they make. But you know what? That's not always the case. Sometimes people fudge it, and that's part of what happened. So you had people who are not necessarily being truthful about how much they truly could afford, which meant that there were people who were not able to afford it because they weren't truthful about their income. Plus, you had an oversupply of housing. So we've got those two factors. Let's talk about what's happening today. So we are actually still low on inventory. Builders learn their lessons. So even with new builds, we are still dramatically down for being able to meet the demand of all the people who are seeking housing. So we still don't quite have it, especially here in the Nashville area. We talked about inventory a little bit ago, but we still remain low when it comes to inventory, because as you saw, we were in the 11,000 number in terms of housing that was on the market in March of 2019 versus sitting right there in the 8,000 range for March of 2023. Even though we're up about 5,000 from March 2022, we still have not even gotten back to the levels that we were at come 2019, which remember is pretty much our baseline right now. So still dramatically low on inventory. So instead of a supply of inventory, we're actually lacking inventory. Those are two factors that are dramatically different today than it was back then. In fact, don't just take my word for it. Trust but verify, and let's actually go take a look at what our RealTrack statistics, which is our MLS statistics, are showing us when it comes to the supply of homes. Okay, so what you're taking a look at right now is InfoSparks. This is a part of our MLS system. As you can see up here at the top, the orange line is going to be our baseline for our entire MLS, which is going to be all 9 counties that make up Middle Tennessee. Then you have Franklin, Brentwood, and Nolensville. You can see Nolensville is kind of in that goldy color, Brentwood's in green, Franklin is in this gray navy color. So hopefully these charts are going to be really helpful in terms of what we're looking at. So if you actually take a look down here, I've backed out this data 5 years. We really want to take a look at what was happening in 2019. So what we're first looking at is month supply, because again, we were just talking about low inventory. So as you can see, if you're taking a look at this graph, you can really tell as you watch, you can start to see an uptick in inventory and then it dipped down. And now right here in 2023, you can see that it's slightly ticking back up, right? And so again, this is encompassing all of Middle Tennessee, also comparing what Franklin, Brentwood, and Nolensville have done. So if we're taking a look at this, as you can see at the end of March of 2023, everything in terms of month supply is sitting right there between 2.8 and 3.2, or 2.4 and 3.2. So what does that mean? That is saying that it would take, on any of those numbers, it would take 2.4 or 2.8 or 3.2 months for us to clear out all active inventory that we have on the market until we had none left. So what does month supply tell us? Well, when you are generally sitting between that 0 month to 4 month mark, you're really sitting, if it's going to take you between 0 and 4 months supply, you're really looking at that seller market. Then that 5-6 month range, that's considered a neutral market. And then when you get 6 months and beyond, that's considered a buyer's market. So as you can see, yes, it's ticked back up slightly, but we are still not at level in terms of month supply as we were even in June of 2020. We are still even behind that. Now let's compare it back to the beginning of 2019. Let's actually move that to March of 2019. So as you can tell, for the entire MLS, they had a 3.6 month supply of inventory compared to 2.8 that we have now. In Franklin, it was 3.8 months back then, Whereas now it's 2.8. Brentwood was 3.6 back then. Now Brentwood's 3.2, and Nolensville was 5.1 months. So they were actually in that real neutral zone versus Nolensville now sitting at that 2.4 month range. So that's what we're looking at when it really comes to that month's supply. Now let's take a look at a couple of other statistics, because of course we have to evaluate several different benchmarks when it comes to our statistics. So now we're going to take a look at what days on market looks like. So this is how long from the time it goes on market until it is going under contract. So as you can see, all of these lines were much higher than what they are now. Have we started to see a little upward trend? Yes, we have. But again, it's still not back to those pre-2019 levels. So as you can see in terms of days on market, now this is median. We also have average, but as you can see, Franklin, Brentwood sitting right at 4 days in terms of median days on market. Nolensville's at 2. If we flip this over to average, 17, 18, 14. Now, of course, that's counting in those outlier properties that do sit on the market longer. But again, we're still sitting below our levels of where we were in 2019, which if we move it to March of 2019, there you can see 31 days, 32, 38 for Franklin, Brentwood, and Nolensville back then, again, comparing it to what we're seeing today. So these are all things that we take a look at. And then of course, let's also take a look at new listings, because that's also going to, again, speak to just inventory levels as well. So in terms of what we've seen, as you can see here, this is telling us how many new homes have come to the market in March versus what came to the market back then. So again, these numbers actually, you can still see in terms of inventory, we're actually still down. Well, let's move it to March. So it's March to March. But back then, Franklin had basically 3.8 or 3,873 homes on the market. But right now we're only sitting at 3,046. Then you got to look at Brentwood. Brentwood had 1,653. We're comparing that to Brentwood now that's sitting at 1,259. Nolensville was 1,774. Nolensville is now just at 983. So as you can see, the number of new listings coming to the market still has not met back up to where we were at 2019. Our month supply is still below where we were at 2019. So again, when we're looking at a crash, we're talking about, is it happening? We still do not have a lot of these markers that make up, we're still dealing with an undersupply, not an oversupply of homes. We still are dealing with a demand that homes are still going quickly. We're not seeing these 100+ days on market. We're sitting nowhere in terms of month supply. We're sitting nowhere really close to even a neutral market. We're still very much in a seller's market. So in the Nashville area, we are still, we aren't having those, markers that can signal a crash. We're just still not seeing those here right now. Now, one of the other factors that factored into that crash was the fact that people had higher debt. They were borrowing against any equity that they had in the home. And then when it came to equity, if they had it, they were borrowing against it. But if they didn't have it, they were underwater. That was also a major part of the problem, was that people they bought too high and then the home values decreased. So let's actually take a look at what percentage of list price and what the average sales price is that we're seeing in these areas. So let's first go to sales price, right? So we are taking a look at everything here. Again, orange going to be the baseline for the entire Middle Tennessee area, whereas we are really focusing here on Franklin, Brentwood, and Nolensville because, this is Williamson County that we're talking about for the most part here, especially where Franklin, Brentwood, and Nolensville are. Williamson County did fare far better during the crash of 2008 than many other counties in the state. And so we're taking a look at these areas in particular. So if you take a look here, this is the median sales price. So as of March 2023, you had Franklin sitting right there at 900,000, which, if you're evaluating this tail end of this graph, you can see these slight dips. So when people are saying prices are crashing, in these areas, prices are not crashing. We're actually going to talk about that piece of the pricing because I was explaining this to a client again this week. So you can see it's at 900,000, but that's actually up 16.1% from the same time last year. Then you've got Brentwood that's there at 1,090,000. That's up 9% from the same time last year. And then you've got Nolensville sitting at 800,000. That's actually up 26.8% of the time. Nolensville is continuing to grow. That's why you see such this dramatic number. Nolensville has a really big new build community. And if you're interested in learning more about Nolensville, I did a recent update on it. Again, check it out. We'll link it up top. But if you're curious, just like seeing that big jump, there's a lot of new builds happening in Nolensville. People continue to move there, which is drawing up that home price there. But so let's go back and let's actually compare that to March of 2019 in terms of the median sales price. I mean, look at that. Look at this. So Franklin, it was at $520,000. Now it's at $900,000. Look at Brentwood at $665,000. Now it's over $1 million. Nolensville was sitting right there at $469,000. Now Nolensville is at $800,000. So that's going to kind of lead into the next part of how this time is varying differently from back in 2008. So you can see overall home prices have continued on this upward trajectory through the years, of course, with these bigger gains happening in the last 2.5 years, right? So you can see that it grows. Now, people will I'm sure will notice as we're looking at things here, they'll be like, oh, well, see in February, Franklin was at $899,950 versus $9 now, right? Like such a small difference, but someone is bound to be like, it went down. We are seeing some minor fluctuations in price. So let me address that really quick and then we'll come back here. So when we're talking about pricing, we have to have a grasp on what actually happened because again, you'll see you'll see headlines out there that are saying, oh my God, home prices are crashing, the world's falling apart. No. So what is happening? Because yes, you are seeing some price reductions in the market, but what does that actually signal? What is that actually telling us? Well, let's go back and analyze what actually has happened over the last several years. We've already talked about how the market went from gaining speed to just exploding really quickly, right? And people going 75,000, 100,000. I mean, no joke, I'm pretty sure I remember seeing that a buyer offered a seller a Hawaiian vacation to win a multiple offer situation. I'm not joking, that's a true story. Not my client, but that happened in the Middle Tennessee area. That's how desperate people were for homes. But in that, you have to see that the buyer at a certain point, the market dictated that home values sit here. And then because of the laws of supply and demand, there was such low supply that even though the market was dictating here, the buyer was adding on what they wanted. The buyer was saying, you know what, the market says this, but I am willing to go here to get this house. And so that contributed to us seeing home prices skyrocket. And that's where we saw that 4% appreciation month after month after month. Now that, interest rates have risen, we've had more inventory come to the market, but still not the amount that we truly need to level us completely out. But because of that, all of a sudden, this piece of the equation where the buyer was willing to accept this part of pricing, now that's come off. So the market is back to dictating more or less home prices. So it's not that prices are crashing. It's just that because of the way our market's moving now, the buyer doesn't have to add on their piece of the pricing equation, the home value equation. They don't have to. Now, are multiple offers still happening? Yes, but again, it's not this. It's like this. It's not this. So that piece of the equation has come off. So now, again, the market is we're going back to the normal standards of what does the market's the driver now versus the buyer being the driver now in terms of pricing. So that's where you start to see, oh, well, we've seen a price drop, right? you've seen a price drop because the market is readjusting to what it should be, to what normal standards are, because buyers aren't having to add their piece of the puzzle into that equation. Okay, so now that we talked about pricing, I hope that better explains why we do see a slight dip here. Again, nothing dramatic. We do not see a line that's just tanking downwards. We're just starting to see a leveling off happening here. But think about this. So we also talked about how a lot of people actually didn't have true equity in their homes back then, whereas people have equity in their homes now. So even if things went south, most likely they could sell, still make a profit, pay off their loan, and not have to worry about foreclosure. And even just taking a look at these lines here, you know, if somebody bought, let's go back to March of 2019. If somebody bought in Franklin for $520, imagine that somebody bought around $520 in March of 2019. Obviously, if we watch the way that the median home sale price has moved, they have equity built into their home. I have clients that just over the past 2 years have 6 figures worth of equity in their home because of the way things moved. Now, can we expect equity to continue to move at a crazy fast, unsustainable pace? Of course not. But what we're looking at in terms of, you know, back then, people did not have the kind of equity that people have in their homes now. And people, because of stricter lending standards, people are not, these people have less debt than what people had back then. So overall, it's better, smarter financial means, that again sets us apart from what happened. And if we're talking about foreclosures, you know, even in the Middle Tennessee area in Williamson County, which again is where Franklin, Brentwood, Nolensville are all located, in Williamson County right now, only 1.9% of homeowners are actually potentially underwater on their homes. Everybody else has equity built in. So these are all things to consider when it comes to talking about the real estate market. Before we finish up here, I know that this is median, so I'm going to show you average as well. So as you can see, again, with average, overall, if you're taking a look at this chart, things are trending in the upward trajectory. Of course, you're going to start to see these fluctuations here as our market just figures itself out. So if we're looking at average home sale price, you know, in Franklin, you're sitting right there at $1,083,925. Again, that's up 7.7% of last year. Brentwood, you're looking at $1,402,629. That's up 10.9% from last year. And in Nolensville, you're sitting at $858,140. And again, up 26.7% from last year. And if we actually move that back and we compare it to 2019, you know, Franklin was sitting right there at $594,000, Brentwood right there at $776, Nolensville there at $497. So again, you can see all of these things are moving in the upward trajectory. So we have been covering a lot of statistics as we're walking through this, because again, I believe we need to be approaching this in a facts not fear situation. And so as you can see, our market continues to be healthy. We're still sitting in a seller's market. Nashville continues to land on list of least vulnerable cities to a potential economic downturn. Now, there are cities across the US that are far more vulnerable than what we are, but we have a lot going for us. You know, the fact that people continue to relocate here and the reasons why they're relocating here are not changing. People are moving for the way of life. The fact that we have no state income tax, we are a business tax-friendly state. We offer more of that family-centric values that some people are looking for. We also have so many different types of property that you can find here. You can get farmland, lakeland, downtown city living. You can get suburban living. There are so many different kinds of living here. So it offers a little bit of something for everybody. So we continue to see people come here. Businesses are relocating their headquarters here. Nashville continues to grow. I know I've said this in other videos, but it's worth repeating. We're expected to have another 200,000 people move here by 2025 and another 1 million people move to the state of Tennessee by 2040, with 57% of that landing here in the Middle Tennessee area. So we are going to continue to grow, which means that people are going to continue to need places to live. And right now, as you can see, based on those statistics I showed you, we are still low when it comes to inventory. Builders cannot build fast enough to keep up with the demand that's coming. So Nashville, while we are not completely immune from things happening on a national scale, if you're taking a look at what's happening, because I've said it before, I'll say it again, real estate is hyper local. So what's happening here in Nashville can be different than what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in LA, what's happening in New York. It's going to be different, right? Even what's happening in different parts of our city can be different. So real estate's hyper local. But as you look at it, overall, Nashville's sitting in a really great spot. In fact, one of my preferred lending partners, he and I actually sat down and we had a discussion about what we're seeing in the Nashville market. We talked also specifically about his passion for first-time home buyers and educating them and just what it actually means for real estate to be a part of the plan and helping people build financial wealth, how that's an important part, because I know a lot of times people can say it, but maybe people don't always understand it. And we had that conversation this week, and I'm going to be releasing this as the next video after this where you can hear that conversation. If you're maybe just curious to learn more, because in that video we also talked about just how blessed we are to be able to live and work in this city, because we do have so much going for us. Now, before we wrap up, another thing to talk about, because there is that big R word that's kind of looming over our heads. It's called recession. And so there are lots of opinions out there that we've already been in one. It's just people aren't necessarily wanting to put the stamp on it and call it what it is. But here's the thing, a recession does not mean home values decrease necessarily. In fact, 4 out of the last 6 recessions, home values actually continued to appreciate. Now, of course, 2008 was one of the ones that, home values did absolutely take a downturn. But a recession does not mean a housing crisis. In fact, if you actually take a look at this chart here, this is taking a look at what home values are over the last 30 years. And if you look at this chart, you can see that yes, there are a few times that there is a dip in home values, but overall from the start of this graph to where we are now, that is an upward trajectory. So homes, if you can ride out the low points, they are still going to continue to go up. So all of that to say, a recession does not mean a housing crash. It does not mean a reduction in home values. Nashville, we are continuing to move forward. We're still very much in our spring market. And here's the thing, with that recession, when recessions come, that actually pushes interest rates down, which is a great thing. But here's something to think about if you're waiting for interest rates to drop. Especially if you're a first-time buyer, right? When interest rates drop, that does mean that more buyers enter the market, which means more competition for you, which could mean a multiple offer situation, which could mean less negotiating power. Now, that's not always the case. Not every house is necessarily going to be a multiple offer situation, but there is something to be said. There are great opportunities still happening right now for buyers. So if you were thinking about making a move, I would love to talk more with you about what is happening in the Nashville market and where is a great place for you to land. If you are actually ready to start that conversation, there's actually a link down below where you can click. Go ahead and book a Zoom discovery call with me. If you're not quite ready for that just yet, that is okay too. I actually have a free Nashville relocation guide located down below. Feel free to click that and download it. If you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. All of my contact information is below. My name is Caitlin Martin. I'll see you next time.